fall into. I was told from a very young age that by virtue of being born a Black woman, that I was somehow a victim in this country and life was going to be harder for me. And it's a very easy narrative to fall for because you don't have to take accountability for your actions. And I think that's what a lot of people are falling for right now in this country. And that's what makes Black Lives Matter such a powerful organization.
Yeah, what do you think when you see, the big story this week that apparently is being censored on Facebook? The head of Black Lives Matter, she's bought something like $4 million worth of houses, I think 5 different houses in a couple different states in the last couple of years. And she was just on an interview that's been going around on Twitter where she basically was like, well, I have no problem with it because, I'm using that money and those houses for my family. And it's like, yeah, that's what we all do with money. That's what pretty much everyone does. What do you make of that?
It's very interesting how these trained Marxists love capitalism so much.
They sure do.
Once you get a taste of fame and once you get a taste of money, it's very easy to fall back into the capitalist America that you hate so much.
Yeah. Elijah, since you are often out there, can you kind of pinpoint when these things are happening, when it goes over the edge, like that it starts seemingly somewhat peaceful? And correct me if I'm wrong, that usually it seems to me there's like a moment where it's sort of peaceful at the beginning, but every time it goes over, either by design or just entropy or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, there's actually a science to this. So we've actually created several stages of a protest and how it develops into a riot. And it's kind of interesting. And I'm sure a lot of your viewers would like to realize that most of these events start out pretty innocuous. And that's stage 1, which is the gathering point. And this is what the media tends to focus on. This is the point when you'll see HuffPost, you'll see Daily Beast, BuzzFeed, Vox out there covering stage 1, interviewing people that are dressed kind of bizarrely. And it ends up just being an amalgamation of mentally ill people, usually angry people, and often disadvantaged people with IQ, it appears, by their later behavior, that come together and, diverse group of people, very diverse. Then stage 2, what happens, that's when the chanting starts happening. They end up, coming together with their Black Lives Matter chants. You feel the energy rising. This might also be them marching, kind of becoming coordinated. Stage 3 is what's really dangerous. Stage 3 is the first time that a law is broken. And this is a very pivotal point in any protest. So after stage 2 is usually when the mainstream media stops recording or they get back in their vans and they leave. And that's what you see on the internet. Stage 3 is where I like to have my fun. That could be a brick thrown. It could be them calling an unlawful assembly and people deciding to stay past the curfew. And it's stage 4 is when after that first law is broken, it encourages people to start committing more crime. So this is a group think in the left. They're enabled by other people's actions. Just like you get a donut for getting your little vaccine shot and you have to have some sort of childhood reward to get something, they feel enabled. And at stage 4 is when it becomes and it spreads to where it becomes dangerous to even report on it. And stage 5 is the actual riot. So once the chaos spreads, it becomes the standard of the event. And that's usually when police lose control. If police can't stop it at stage 4, then they lose control of the city.
Yeah, Elijah, you do realize that the Media Matters trolls watch this show, and you just said stage 3, that's where I have my fun when they throw a brick through the window. You see what you've done to all of us, the headache that we're going to have for the rest of the day.
Hey, I have my fun. I have my fun doing the job that journalists are supposed to be doing, but they're not. I think it's fun to say to billion-dollar corporations that with a cell phone in my hand or a $1,500 camera, that I and many, many other people that are awesome that are out there are doing a much better job than these corporations. And that's shame on them for that.
Yeah, no, complete shame on them. Amala, I have to ask you the stupid sort of identity politics question, because I feel like there's going to be a certain amount of people watching this going, wait a minute, how can a black woman not think that BLM and Antifa are right or the rest of it? Like, what kind of blowback do you get in terms of that?
I get so much hate on the internet for my views, and it's very interesting to me that people are much more likely to support somebody who sits down and calls them a victim than to support somebody who tells them the exact opposite and that they can succeed and that they can do whatever they want. And to those people, I ask, what has Black Lives Matter done for you? Mm-hmm. Because through the years that this organization has been a thing, and what I would identify as a terrorist organization at this point, they have done absolutely nothing for Black lives. In fact, they've been solely responsible for the death of many Black people during these riots and protests. So I get a lot of hate for what I say, but I have facts to back me up, and there's no reason or logic on their side.
Yeah, well, what have they done? They got the founder of Black Lives Matter just bought a $1.4 million home in Topanga Canyon, which is 98.6% white. So
there's one Black Live that has been successful to BLM.
they're doing a little something, a little something. So let's talk about the George Floyd stuff because it's on the way. Like we're watching Brooklyn Center, Minnesota, basically be destroyed right now, night after night. We're allowing it, and to your point, Elijah, it's not being covered properly on CNN or anywhere else. And this is what I always talk about on the show, that basically people are in a reality war right now. If you watch those channels and you don't see what's going on YouTube or on Twitter or anywhere else, you'd have no idea. You have no idea what's happening in the Chauvin trial right now. You have no idea what the evidence is or what the experts are saying or the rest of it. Isn't it kind of nuts that we can basically sit here and say, yes, the riots are coming? Like, why don't we talk about, for example, like, are the police saying what they're going to do in advance? They don't seem to do that too often. Do you talk to cops that give you any insight on that, Elijah?
Yeah, that's actually really important factor there. So the media starts to gaslight for violence in advance, right? Reuters says that the summation of the greatest police misconduct trial we've ever seen in decades, that's a key phrase, in decades, AKA the reaction to this should be monumental to something that we haven't seen in decades, right? They're gaslighting you for LA riot level mayhem. And what happens in these areas is the police actually stand down. And I always wonder that too. Like, this is on a personal level. When you're seeing Brooklyn Center and it's like on day 3, they're like, we're sending in more National Guard. You go, why were the National Guard not deployed en masse the first night? Why, as the most powerful country in the world, do we not have the ability and the capability to police our own cities when we can spend millions of dollars bombing Middle Eastern countries and coordinating global wars? Can we not somehow have coordinated law enforcement at a local level? And, you know, a lot of this comes down to the fact that the police there get their hands tied by city officials who want this, what's called non-interventional or non-intervention, non-interaction, to de-escalate by not getting involved. Just last night at a BLM protest in Los Angeles, a video reporter named Kaylin Dalmeda for Scriber News was badly assaulted in front of 40 police officers. I counted on the live stream. They gave him a concussion. They tried to steal his phone. They beat him up into the side of a wall. And all the police stood by and watched. And why is that? That's not because the officers themselves are bad men and women. It's because the cities themselves somehow allow narrative to get in the way of what they were meant to do, which is to serve and protect the people. And I believe that the officers are frustrated in these cities like Seattle and in Minneapolis. They have a shortage of officers. They are not being allowed to do their jobs. And we have to hold those politicians accountable that are stopping them.
Yeah, well, I don't think it's a conspiracy to say that this is exactly what the progressive leaders want. I mean, this is the foot soldiers of their party. So it's like, in this case, in the LA case, it's like Garcetti's a lefty and he wants riots. I honestly believe that at this point. I think there's no other way to look at it. Amala, do you think that's like a fair estimation?
Oh, I absolutely agree. And I spend a lot of time on social media, and you can see how all these platforms are sort of propagating these stories and shoving them down people's throat. They're ready for the rage, and they're ready to push this false narrative so that when this trial ends, we see the riots. And I know that the people on social media are ready for this to happen. They released a report on Twitter today talking about how there were several police officers in the U.S. and sheriff's departments who had donated to the Kyle Rittenhouse trial and his defense. And why all of a sudden, during all this talk of Black Lives Matter and police brutality, is this report now coming out? So I know that they're fueling up the American people for these protests and for these riots.
And it's crazy how high it goes, because I'm sure you guys saw the statement that Obama issued on Twitter, you know, talking about Daunte Wright, you know, another young black man being killed. Now, nobody wants Daunte Wright to be dead, but the simple fact is we showed the video several times this week. I mean, he did resist arrest. Now, that's not excusing what that 26-year veteran female police officer did, whether she made a mistake or it was negligent or intentional or whatever it is, but he did resist arrest. But Obama doesn't even put that in the statement, like as if he's trying to instigate this stuff too.
it's insane to me that we spin these narratives as if these people were simply killed for their skin color, or that there was no prior altercation with the police, or that they weren't trying to resist or evade arrest. We were looking at reports from 2019 where 19 unarmed Black men were shot and killed by police officers. If you go through those reports and look at each of those individual crimes, nearly all of them were trying to evade or resist arrest. And that is a common factor in a lot of these situations. And nobody wants to address it, because if they address that elephant in the room, they have to speak to a larger truth about the Black community.
Right. And speaking of things that we're not allowed to address, last night they released this video of this 13-year-old kid being shot in Chicago, and they were like teasing it out, like, the video's coming, everybody, so let's get ready to go crazy. I mean, that's literally what Twitter was basically doing in their moment section. Like, we know something bad's coming. But then I even saw something like, I saw Andrew Yang, who I've had on the show, who I think is a decent person, but he even tweeted out, basically cops killing another unarmed young Black man. And it's like, if you look at the video, he's got a gun. He had a gun at one point. That's not unarmed. He may not have had it that moment. But again, it's just this like muddled truth. Elijah.